everybody. Thanks for coming to our conference and coming to my session. I like that we have a packed house here. That's a good sign. My name is Todd Zipper, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Learning House. I have a pretty simple mission in what I do for Learning House, and that's to help college and universities grow their online programs. So if I asked everybody the question here, do you want to grow your online programs? What kind of, everybody raise their hand if they're interested in growing their online programs. All right, good, so you're in the right place. All right, so my purpose today is to help you understand how I would approach creating an ideal marketing plan. I've been in the online education space now for about 10 years. And both on the side of buying leads and generating leads from the school perspective, as well as selling leads from the marketing services perspective. And I'm going to hopefully give you a nice balance between those two views and bring a lot of that experience to bear. Okay, so what I want to do, this is going to act as our table of contents for the marketing plan. I've come up with 8 steps for creating an ideal marketing plan. And first, we have to take, I'm actually going to put 2 steps down, which to me is figuring out what the current reality is of your school's situation in terms of growing online programs. First is going to be taking a look at the big picture. There's a lot of things that I'm going to look at to see whether your school is ready to go online and to market heavily programs. And if there are obstacles, we need to find what those are out in the beginning. And that's what creating a checklist is for. I'm going to go through that as well. Checklist is something that's not just about marketing, it's about looking at all the departments and seeing where things are maybe right and where things are wrong, and then providing that feedback to help the institution get ready to grow and compete in the online world. Third, we're going to set goals. This kind of goes without saying. We're going to set qualitative goals, we're going to set quantitative goals. It's a process that we have to follow. Fourth, the most common question that I'm asked when people are talking about growing their online programs is, what program should I offer? So from that perspective of product development, for us as marketers, we're going to look at the market research. And that's something that you can't take lightly. It's something you will figure out in creating a checklist and going through that process, what programs you might want to design and looking through what aspects of your institution shine out the most, but also through market research, you're going to find out which programs you should be launching. Fifth, building creative marketing assets. This kind of goes without saying. You need to have the tools at your disposal, so when you're ready to go and market, you can pretty much go through any channel and market the program. 6, select lead gen channels. Most people, when they design a marketing plan, this is what they're going to do. They're going to list all the different channels, what money they're spending for each channel, what their goals are, and kind of go forward. We'll go through that. Creating a budget and a forecast is incredibly important. We're going to talk about not just kind of a P&L forecast, but also a monthly budget and how we sort of iterate on that month to month. And then finally, and for me most importantly, reporting and measuring progress. The one thing that I've learned over 10 years is basically everything that I do doesn't work on the first time. So it's constant iteration. And I'm sure you've all been there. So the other thing I want to say before we kind of jump right into this is that if anybody has any questions throughout this, I'd like this to be interactive, and I want to just be sort of lecturing here. So if something sort of sparks your interest, just raise your hand or call it out and we'll have a discussion. Okay, the first big thought is I take a cross-functional approach to marketing, which maybe some people don't like because I'm kind of interested in encroaching on other departments. But at the end of the day, if we're responsible for marketing these programs, we need to make sure that these other areas of the institution are buttoned up and we're all working together. So for me, marketing, one of the big things, and I've seen this work in different ways, is that I believe that marketing and enrollment need to kind of dance, or marketing admissions need to dance to the same tune. So hopefully they're reporting into the same individual. If not, at least they're meeting regularly and they have a very cohesive strategy. That's something that is very important. The other area that's important is on the curriculum development and product side. Ultimately, we're marketing programs or products, and it's imperative that marketing has an understanding, perhaps a say. We'll talk about this in market research on what's actually the curriculum, what are the programs that we're all developing. Second, this is something that increasingly I see competition coming into the market. I think it's actually bordering on fierce now at this point. This is just a little chart that shows, even from 2009, a number of schools with online programs. What this doesn't show is let's say when I started Education Connection back in 2006, how many bachelor's of business degrees online were there versus today. That growth has been exponential. So you are now facing an era where online higher ed is maturing. And that's, we probably have about another 3 to 5 years of growth according to EduVentures, where today it's about 12% of all post-secondary students are fully online, going to about 18% in 2015, 2016. But at that point, it's going to kind of flatline and start to grow at a similar rate that all post-secondary grows at, about 1 to 2%. So the next slide is a little bit to show this sensationally, but what online does, if you think about social networking, 5 or 10 years ago, everybody's getting into it, everybody can be successful, but of course we know that that's not the case. So I think it's important for you, when you think about this, that 5 to 10 years ago, by you just releasing online programs, you were going to be successful. I was with Kaplan back in 2003, and that was the era. It was just go, 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 because everybody was growing. That is not the case today. You need to be smarter than your competition, and you need to be thinking about who your competition is and how you can sort of outmaneuver them. So the important point here is not everybody's going to win, and you need to have that in your mindset as you go through your strategy. So I'm not all gloom and doom here. There are some amazing case studies that I think many of the schools in this room can achieve themselves. St. Leo, and one point is that most of these schools have sort of have looked at online as something that they've been focused on for about 10 years or so now. So this is not, so there are a couple points. One, this is not something that happens overnight. Two, you can achieve massive growth, or at least substantial growth. And it's something that I certainly believe our clients can do, and that's what I'm here to help achieve. One school that I want to just point out here, Grand Canyon University. What's interesting about Grand Canyon is it's a for-profit university today. Although 8, 10 years ago, it was a not-for-profit university that didn't look so dissimilar from the schools in this room. What they've done now, though, after going for-profit and going online, is they're taking a very not-for-profit strategy. They're trying to build both their ground programs and their online programs. During Casey's presentation this morning, that was the only question that was asked about cannibalization. It's a constant question that comes up. We believe strongly that it's a virtuous cycle, that as you build online, you build on ground, you're building awareness for your programs, you're building employees, you're building graduates who become employees in the marketplace, and it becomes that virtuous cycle that you want to support. So we fully believe in this cycle, and we want to support that. The next big thought is, where does your brand resonate? I have schools come to me and they say, you know what, Todd, we got our market covered, take us to California, and we're in Georgia, or what have you. Well, there's a ton of noise in California, and you're probably going to get knocked around a lot. So what we say is, especially in the early stages, you have to focus on where your brand resonates. It's probably going to be locally, it could be regionally, if you have lots of instructional sites, which is something that we look for and encourage, but also by program. What's really strong on your campus? And therefore, what might sort of go online and be very successful as well. So we don't think there's a cannibalization there. We think there's a complement relationship there. Me as a marketer, this is the most important thing that I think about every single day with our clients. Where can we generate organic leads? This is obvious. There's only a finite number of these leads, and they don't all just come from typing in online education or Google. But this is where you could then leverage. You can support all your paid media campaigns by building out your organic media campaigns. You can't ignore these, and you can't fully outsource these, meaning that you have to have a good understanding of how to generate organic leads, whether you're working with your service provider directly or indirectly. You need to make sure that you are constantly looking for the low-hanging fruit that's out there, especially when you launch your program. So an example that I have is if you have an RN program or you have a BSN program on ground, obviously an online RN to BSN program is going to do great. If you have a really successful Bachelor's of Business program with lots of graduates out there in the marketplace, been around for 10 or 15 years, an MBA program online is going to make sense. A lot of this stuff is just common sense. You just need to just be disciplined about thinking about, which programs to offer. Okay, let's move on to the due diligence checklist. So when we sit down with the school for the first time, we sort of look at it as, okay, well, what do we need to know about this school, not just in marketing, but throughout all of these different functional areas, throughout the organization, curriculum, training, technology, admissions, and retention. We're looking for roadblocks. We're looking for obstacles that are going to make it difficult to enroll students. Just some highlights here. I mean, one of the big areas that we're obviously looking in is admission standards, admissions policies, because that's kind of so inextricably tied to marketing. But for example, at least 6 starts per year, this is pretty much mandatory these days. Why is that? Well, it's obvious to me. I don't know if it's obvious to you, but students, they're anxious. They have all these schools out there offering start dates once a month. Even some schools are like once a week, like the big ones, like University of Phoenix. So people aren't going to wait around if it's going to take 4 months before you actually you get to enroll. The second thing is transfer credit process. One of the things that we learned from Carol Paslani's study is that we're going to publish soon, and you're going to hear more about tomorrow. So sorry for stealing your thunder here, Carol. Okay. But 80% of students are coming to college with some college credit. And not just a few credits, maybe 1 or so years worth of credit. So you have to be prepared and have a really strong process around developing that transfer credit and giving them comfort that what they're going to achieve, at your school. Conditional acceptance. This is really something where we want to stop the user from shopping. You're waiting on paperwork, but you pretty much know the student has all the qualifications. Accept them. Let them even start classes, and let that paperwork sort of come in before they achieve, they get their financial aid. So that's important to us. Offering a variety of degrees. This is something that, again, a lot of schools try to leg into online education with 1 program or 2 programs. What we say is that we face this problem with a couple of schools where, okay, they started with associate programs and they don't have bachelor programs online. So the student, one of the first questions that they ask, okay, I'm going to do my associates in criminal justice, is can I get my bachelor's of criminal justice here? The answer is no. That conversion rate is probably going to decline. So again, what we're trying to do is make sure that we start spending money out there, we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck and sort of stand above the crowd. So we like to talk about ladders. If you're going to do a business degree, have an associate, a bachelor's, and a master's. Criminal justice, the same thing. Nursing, bachelor's up to master's, and across the board. Next point, competitive price point. I think, a year or 2, 3 ago, maybe this wasn't as big of an issue. I believe today that this is becoming more and more of an issue. That students are going to shop. Information is going to become more mainstream, that they can compare and contrast much more easily. And they're going to be much more conscious of the sticker price. Even though they can take out the loans, they might not feel the impact that day. I think it's going to become more and more important. And if you're coming into the market somewhat new and maybe you don't have this huge reputation yet online, it's something that I think you got to be thinking about pricing competitively and helping to solve some of the cost issues that all we keep hearing about in the market. And finally, clear course maps. Students need to know what they're getting themselves into, their entire path all the way through graduation, especially when they're coming in with all this transfer credit. We think that's very important, so they know when the courses are going to be available, and I think it will increase retention over time. Okay, goals. So on the goal side, there's going to be subjective goals. There's going to be hard goals. And, we think we're dealing with mission-driven institutions here. You need to make sure that what you're doing online and building your online school is married up with the mission of the greater institution. That comes first and foremost. Next, I've kind of laid out goals in terms of sort of departmental areas, and again, this is a marketing presentation, but it's very important that you think about these other areas. First is let's just talk about marketing. So the marketing side, you're going to look at cost per lead, you're going to look at cost per start. The truth is that cost per lead doesn't really matter at all. It's all in relation to cost per start. And cost per start is all in relation to lifetime value. So I'm going to reflect on some public data, but there's a company out there called Tutor that works with some of the elite institutions, Ivy League institutions in this country, and they talk about $10,000, $15,000 cost per start numbers. Well, that's because they're charging $80,000 for the degree online. So depending on what we think the lifetime value is, which is a function of your cost per credit hour, number of credits, retention rate, is really how you need to think about your cost per start, and you need to be thinking about that as a percentage of revenue. So how much are you willing to sacrifice in terms of marketing? Admissions goals. So there's several admissions goals you're going to be thinking about. What I didn't list here is your contact rate, your application rate, your enrollment rate, or I should say your acceptance rate, and then your start rate. Now, obviously, start's the important thing, and not just for your programs, but overall, you want to be thinking about both of these things. And lastly, are the retention goals. So for me, this kind of ties back to lifetime value, but what is your retention rate term to term? Obviously, that marketing can't really impact that, but it can if you're getting feedback on certain types of leads that you're buying or certain types of students, and maybe you can sort of iterate that and change policies if you think things aren't looking good. Okay, so let's move on to market research. Again, like I said, most common question, what program should I develop? You all want to know that answer. And it's not an easy answer, but it's one that you can work out over time.
Do you want us to save our questions for the end, or
no.
As they come up?
Shoot, this way I can get a drink of water. Thank you.
Reference admission, starts, retention, and so forth. In our online program, we noticed that online students generally take about half as many courses per semester as on-campus students. And we're working hard to get that up. So for us, that's one part of the goal. And also, how many courses you're taking in a semester affects retention, because the slower you're going, the longer it takes, the harder it is to retain. Any comments on that?
Well, it's a chicken and the egg a little bit, right? We talk to schools a lot about this. You don't have a lot of students, you're not offering as many courses. Again, the course mapping helps a little bit. I'm trying to encourage students to take, sort of 2 courses at a clip moving forward. As a marketer, I think that sort of is, there's a little bit of a handoff, in that process.
Well, let me share with you what I've been saying to my staff, and then you critique it. I said, we need to stop thinking about admissions and think about registration. That admissions is a bump or a threshold to getting into classes, because it does us no good to just get an admin who doesn't enroll.
Yes, you're 100% right. So we, at Learning House, the way we have tied marketing, enrollment or admissions, and retention all under one umbrella, my umbrella actually, because to that exact point. Because I remember when we were at Kaplan and we used to watch, or just even to go more to the top of the funnel, we'd be all excited we enrolled 2,000 people, and then only 1,600 of them started. Of the 1,600, how many actually then, registered for one course or two courses? So absolutely, you need to be thinking about registrations, and that's why there needs to be a smooth handoff between the enrollment counselors just focused on getting that application and getting that person started versus the transition. And how does that transition work, and how are they registering for classes, not just in the first term, but obviously in the subsequent term. We all know that the first 2 terms is where we're going to get all the dropouts, and that's when you need to be hand-holding these students through the process. So I think that's great advice.
One piece we found out through a study of GPA that our online program had an 11% Fs awarded versus 3% on campus. Drilled down deeper and found out that most of those Fs were received by first semester online students, and they just were out of their league.
Yeah.
So we adjusted and went back and said, all right, faculty, you need to know who's the first semester online students in your class, and give them particular attention in the first couple of weeks, and let them know when that drop-out deadline is, if they've got to fail. And it went down 4%.
Yeah, I mean, the other things that I've seen is introduction to online learning, just to kind of segue them into the process. But I think you're bringing up the exact point that as marketers and focused on student acquisition, all these things matter. So even though we're focused on spending money and driving students to our websites and our contact center, you need to be thinking about all these issues, and we do. I mean, Jim Dunn, our VP of Enrollment, he has all these ideas on how they can improve the funnel way after he's done it. Okay, so market research. Yes, Scott. We got another question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can do some perspective as a prospective online student. I'm going to my master's degree, and I'm shopping around. And earlier you had Drexel University on there, and I kind of it was kind of what I was looking for. But after I saw how much the degree cost, it was like $45,000, and I had to take that off of my prospect list, just because unless I got some kind of scholarship for graduate school, which I know there's not that many.
Right. No.
And
less and less.
Yeah, and I just can't, and I will be able to afford it. I have to almost look like it would just the loans would be too much loan and not be able to pay it back as fast as I would need to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're hearing more and more of those stories. And Drexel has this great brand, been doing it for a long time, traditional non-for-profit, and they're losing students. Now, maybe they're okay with that, but I think there's a happy medium there.
Talk about continuity of programs, if you have a business program, so it's bachelor's, master's. Do you find with online students, the touch point of an associate is more important or no more important than traditional students? Do you think having that associate, we're a 4-year school and we don't offer associates.
I mean, my feeling on the associate is that it's forgetting for a second about how the job market views the degree. For the student, people want to sort of reach a milestone. And so much of online is part-time, is I got to take some time off, it's an adult learner. So if you got to wait 5 years or 4 years or whatever to get that bachelor's degree, it could be discouraging. So that's why we encourage that sort of middle point. Even if it's in general studies, but then you're losing people with 30 credit hours that are coming to you. It's not, they need that middle point, or maybe even 12 credit hours. Forgetting about somebody with a high school diploma, we're talking about somebody with credit hours. So that's how I view that degree. It's assuming that it still has strength in the marketplace, which I think there's some debate about. Any other questions?
For those of you all that have selective admission standards with transfer students, minimum GPA of 2.0 or higher, how many of you all conditionally accept without documentation, transcripts, or appropriate paperwork from your applicants? Just a few. Okay.
All right, so let's talk about market research. What we're trying to figure out is what are the programs and what are the careers that are in demand today, and obviously going into the future. Just to take a step back, the checklist is going to be very important in thinking about product development. So the first thing we're going to look at are the labor trends, right? What is happening locally, regionally, nationally? What are the careers that are in demand? You need to have a good sense of that and the educational paths that are going to sort of meet that demand. Next, we talked about internal resources. It happens a little bit in the checklist, but also through more research is your faculty. Where are you strongest, or weakest for that matter? And where do you think you can leverage quickly, and also you think will be very successful? That's what you got to go after. Competitive analysis. This is pretty easy to do. You go to a site like collegenavigator.gov and you look at pretty much what I recommend. What we do is we look at the competitors within 50 to 100 mile radius. And why do we do that? Again, because we know from Carol's study that 80% of students are going to school online with a school that's located within 100 miles. Most of those schools were there in the 50 miles. And that's a discussion for another time, but it's our belief that we think brand is really important to the student, and that students do want that sort of, this is in my backyard feel. There's graduates, there's employers that recognize it. It's been around for a while. To focus on that. Local or national government modifications. So what this is all about is, like, I was just in New York at a school, and they were talking about how, apparently this has been going on for a long time, but how they may demand that all nurses have a BSN. So these are the trends that you need to be thinking about, in terms of where the government is sort of maybe pushing and pulling around different certifications, and therefore you should be thinking about it. So obviously teacher education is big in this area as well. Big employers. We heard about that from Dave earlier on today. We can't stress enough, what are the employers in your market hiring for? What kind of jobs? You need to be focusing your curriculum around that. So here are just 3 rules of thumb or things that I think that are probably going to serve you well. First, own your own market. Again, I don't think schools understand what it necessarily means to own their own market. They may have a couple hundred students, say, okay, let's go elsewhere here and there. What if University of Phoenix has 1,500 students on ground in your market, plus another few thousand online? So that's what we mean about owning your own market. We're kind of talking about taking it back. It was just in Stephen's presentation from CSG. There's tons of noise out there from all these for-profits, and I think over time, once you kind of can get above the crowd a little bit, your message is going to resonate. Second thing is find your niche. I just talked a little bit about that, but again, what are you really good at? What are you known for? Don't be afraid about putting that online. I see that there's sometimes this tension with on ground and online, but I say go for it, and I think it's going to serve you well. Third, this goes to the latter question about associate, bachelor's, master's. So when working at Education Connection, we ran a contact center. We talked to hundreds, sometimes thousands of students a day. And I can't tell you how many people don't know what they want to study. This is not an 18-year-old. This is a 30-year-old. This is a 35-year-old. They know they need to go back to school. They know they need to get another certification or degree or what have you, but they kind of need some choice, and they need to balance, not just one thing. So, we think that, and as a marketer, I'm always thinking about you're going to spend, $1 million or whatever it is, what comes out the other end? Well, the more choices you have, the lower your cost per acquisition is. So, we try to encourage schools within a couple years to have 10 online programs. It's kind of just a rule of thumb. It's not a perfect science, but you want to have some choice for the consumer. So this is just, I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but basically, the one thing I'm going to say here, I'm going to talk about the website for a second. It's really important. This is where sort of the traditional and the online sort of come together. Your online campus, or the portion of your .edu site that talks about online, I think needs to be prominent. Whether it's its own sort of tab, which some schools do, we encourage on the top, on the left nav. It's really important that we think you stress that, because as you start marketing online programs, people are just going to type into Google, Acme College Online, and they're gonna show up at the .edu. And if you don't have a really good path for them to kind of get information about your online programs, they're gonna just, I'm done with this. This is not that important to the institution. So we think that's really important. These other things, I mean, it's just important that you think about all the different mediums that you're going to need to market. And you have to have a solution there around how you're going to develop your online assets, how you're going to develop your offline assets. Talked about SEO a little bit before. So we just want to make sure you're there. And then obviously on messaging. And for me, I'm going to talk about messaging in the context of branding versus direct response. So I'm a direct response marketer by training to a certain degree. That being said, I love the balance between good branding and good direct response. So, whatever you're doing, I really think that you have to try to have a direct response element involved, whether it's a nice call to action, a good flow through the 800 numbers that you can track, or through the website. Otherwise, you're flying blind, and you don't know what you're doing is working, and that's going to stop you from doing things, because as you start spending money, you're not seeing necessarily direct results, but there could be indirect results that you're seeing. And as you do a lot of different things, you need to know what's working and what's not working, so you can tweak, because marketing is all about iteration. Kind of the blend between creativity and iteration. So I talked a little bit about this, the partnership with the traditional brand. This is one of our clients, Concordia University, St. Paul. We just finished developing this website. And if you can see, I mean, the online portion looks, pretty much identical to the .edu, the regular portion. The idea is it's a smooth transition. The branding feels the same. It's not, even though it's in some ways, I'm talking a lot today about creating an online school, Concordia University online, but at the same point, it's still a spoke on the hub of the main institution, and it should work in lockstep with the campus. So this is a busy slide, but an important one. So I look at lead gen channels in 3 different categories: online marketing, traditional marketing, and partnership marketing. And what is important to me is also thinking about it in terms of paid and unpaid. Because as I mentioned earlier on, I love unpaid. Love it. And I'm constantly trying to do, but the problem is that unpaid is not unpaid. There's something that you did to create unpaid media. Now, hopefully, you're delivering an awesome education that will deliver a lot of unpaid media. And you can sort of pound your chest as a marketer and get someone credit for it. But the reality is you got to give credit back to the academics and the folks that are actually delivering this great education. But we talked about that earlier, referrals, is so important. So let's talk about online marketing. Well, I mean, these are just how I divide up the category. Pay per lead, which is my former industry. This is buying a lead on a cost per lead basis. One thing I'll say here, and it's kind of like, because I probably know too much, is that market is becoming almost impossible to harvest leads. You can get leads, to harvest students, but the for-profit space has just crowded it up so much. And even though the not-for-profits are in there in some form or fashion, the for-profits are grasping right now, given what's happening to their market. They're raising prices. It's getting very difficult to sort of really get leads on a cost-effective basis. What's nice about that market is that you want to start growing tomorrow, boom, you can start getting leads. The problem is you might get an enrollment rate of 0%, so it doesn't really matter. Next area is pay-per-click. Everybody knows what pay-per-click here. is it's also getting much more expensive by the day. It doesn't ever go down. That being said, you need to be there. You need to protect your brand, most importantly, and you need to protect keywords around programs that are relevant to you. Display, cost per impression, you're always going to be seeing opportunities to work with, websites that resonate with your audience. They want to charge it out on a cost per impression basis or something like that. Organic, again, I can't stress enough how much you need to focus on it. The problem with organic is results take a long time to harvest, and you need to take it very seriously. You can't just kind of, I'm going to do a little bit and see how it goes. You have to be committed to the long term there. Email is something that a few years ago I was abandoning almost, but today with the advent of the smartphones, the ubiquity of the smartphones, everybody's checking their email all the time, and I think it's a very effective medium to market. It's captive when somebody actually opens your email. Now, you segment email lots of different ways. One, you want to keep sort of communicating with your old leads, with alumni, but also buying third-party lists and getting very targeted there. On the traditional side, these are things that we all know about: direct mail, print, radio, and television. I advocate for continuing these efforts. I think it's important to push your brand out there, to show your markets that you're here, you're around, you're not going to get bullied out of the market, by for-profits or others that are on there. The issue there is I think you got to really focus on your messaging, making sure that it resonates, that there's response to it. You can't just put it out there. And having good calls to action. Events, to me, and I'll get to this a little bit with the partnerships, but I'm a believer that, University of Phoenix, Capella, Kaplan, some of them have really built out strong event marketing strategies. And I think that this is where you all resonate. I think you need to focus a lot on events. You need to staff that audience, and whether it's general career fairs or specific events for nursing or teaching or what have you, I think you need to focus on that. Scholarships, and these are kind of campaigns. You have some big event, or start goal, you want to give a discount for the next 6 months or something like that. I think you always want to have that arrow in your quiver. Public relations, Stephen at CSG pretty much said it all, but I can't stress this enough. I mean, if your community is talking about you in the news, in online, what have you, that's going to go 1,000 miles for generating new students. Again, like SEO, it's kind of connected to the SEO because it's about generating organic leads, not SEO, organic. It's unclear how you get results there. It takes a lot of commitment, and it's tricky. And I've had success and I've had failures doing this. Partnerships. So what we're doing with our schools is actually we're hiring the ones where we do marketing enrollment for. We are hiring what we call education liaisons. We have one of them in the audience today. And this is someone who's really out there, or many people out there, to sort of really blanket all these different areas. And by the way, they really also act as the canary in the coal mine for you as a marketer. What's working, what's not working, what do they like about the school or not like about the school. That's important feedback that you need from the market. You're going after employers, local government, associations. Again, it could be general about going after a big corporation in your market, or it could be going after hospitals for your RN program, or school districts for your MED programs. Community colleges, again, the for-profits have kind of mastered this. They built articulation agreements with all the community colleges, and I think that's an area you have. I know a lot of people are focusing. I think you got to double your efforts there, making sure the articulation agreements are right, and making sure that you have a marketing strategy around that market, or whether you have an instructional site on site. There's lots of different ways to approach that. Industry events, sponsorships. This could be a nursing event and you're sponsoring it. I think you got to be there as well. Military, Jim just did a whole presentation on that. We are big fans of making your institution military friendly. which is where you need to start. A lot of schools think they're military friendly, but they're really not. When you go through kind of another checklist that we have, that's something that I would strongly encourage you to do. Once you kind of get yourself military friendly, the education liaisons on the bases will be very friendly to you about their active duty military. And that's something, these are great students, they retain well, and obviously they pay well as well. That's the referral programs. There's lots of different ways to approach this, but again, you're looking for ways to create scale and how you create referrals to your institution. Obviously, the best way is delivering first-class education, but I think you need to create the infrastructure to doing that. We're actually working with a third party right now on a social media campaign around students who are existing, who are in the institution at that moment, sort of working with prospects through social media and communicating. These are things that I think you need to provide them the tools to help create the referrals. Any questions there? Okay, we're good. So this was just an example I wanted to show you. These are two of our clients, Midway College and Highland Community College. They have a articulation agreement. You got to create the collateral, and you got to obviously market to these students to show them that this option is available. Okay, so now we're at our last, I think this is our last. Yeah. Okay, so budgeting and forecasting. Well, actually, let me take a step back. I wanted to highlight some things that you need to prepare to do. A process, if you will, in sort of, embarking on your journey. First is budgeting and forecasting. And I'm going to take you through a couple of different spreadsheets that might give you a feel for if you're doing something similar or different. You might be able to get some good rules of thumb there. Paid media buy approvals. I find that in our market, you need to act quickly. So whether it's paid media or creative, you need a process around quickly approving creative and not something you're waiting for weeks or even months on. Remember, you're competing against a whole nation of online programs, for-profits, and you need to have an efficient process here. Reporting, we are constantly looking at data. You need to be looking at what you're doing, what is working, what is not working, and iterating. And finally, vendor implementation. We have a whole process around you bring on a new vendor, a whole process that you go through to make sure that the whole process is smooth. So this is just, you probably can't see this. This is really bad. All right, Excel did not translate, and then we got some blurriness. All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of sense here. So right here, this is starts by program. These are the number of starts. So these are 12 months, 6 starts per year. So I work with a lot of schools, and I don't see them all really focusing on starts, focusing on active earning students, and then iterating this model as you go throughout the year. So that obviously will then affect revenue. And then revenue comes here, and then marketing expense. And it's important to really look at your revenue and your marketing expense side by side, because in the early stages, it's going to make you dizzy and not feel so good. But it's my perspective that I think you got to be committed to driving new students through increased marketing efforts. This one's not so much better. So every month, I recommend you budget for the month, and you kind of have we kind of focus in 3 columns: authorized. I have to remember what I wrote here. Estimated and month to date. So this is like you're going out there, you authorize a bunch of money across all these different verticals and vendors. Then you estimate because you're not sure everything will clear. So you just want to kind of make sure that's kind of marrying up with your budget. And then your month to date, as the month is sort of playing out, you're seeing what works and what's happening. So you're not just blind through it. And then, eventually you're gonna look at your contact rate, your application rate. Those are kind of core metrics you need to be looking at right away, because even though the majority of your students will actually not enroll in the month that you acquired that lead, you still want to sort of see some data and then look back previous month and see how things play out. How are we doing on time here, guys? I know I'm the last one, so I think we're doing okay. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna sort of summarize what we discussed here and how I approach marketing. 8 steps that I do when I'm, let's say, because I get the benefit of working with lots of great schools. I'm constantly thinking about, okay, how do I take this school and make them the king, make them extremely successful? I take a look at the big picture. You cannot underestimate macro factors and how they can influence positively or negatively what you're doing. Creating a checklist, making sure you're buttoned up on all the other departments, not just on what's in your corner. Setting goals, performing market research, building creative marketing assets, selecting the lead gen channels. Your budget is going to constrain you here. Also, what works and what doesn't work is going to constrain you here. But you need to look at everything. Finally, creating a budget and then reporting and measuring progress constantly. So that's pretty much it. That's my presentation. I think it's actually right on time, 45 minutes. So I wanted to give you guys a chance to ask me questions up here or one-on-one or whatever you guys want to do. Anything out there? I know it's getting late. Everybody's looking to...
Just a couple of comments. One is that I have a little difficulty when you're talking about launching numbers of programs at the same time. I understand the rationale, I understand the benefits, but being a small independent college, we probably only have 3 programs that I would want to put out there. The rest of them, have either issues with faculty reticence about online or have quality issues or whatever. So if you would kind of address that, maybe the answer is simple. Just go with your best and be done with it. Remember the word ideal.
This is my ideal way of looking at things.
Okay, yeah.
And the market never plays out that way, or it doesn't always play out that way. So what I would say is, I think you have to show early signs of success. You have to push, but if you don't think that this department is ready for it, then you have to go with what's going to work. Right. But you also have to be realistic and say, if this is not enough, maybe I don't even go. I think you have to have that discipline about, can I be successful here? Because sometimes they say, well, just do a little bit. Well, maybe a little bit is not enough here. And then you also have to look out a few years and say, well, but I want to have a plan. Especially if you're offering all this stuff on the ground and you have that capacity, I want to have the plan to go there. Even if I'm not going there in the next 12 to 24 months, but maybe in 24 to 36 months, I can go there.
The other point was, too, the importance of setting goals. One thing that is helping us, I shouldn't speak in the past, is figuring the conversion formula backwards. If we know we have to have X students enrolled in the program, driving it, figuring that formula backwards so you know how many students you need, how many leads you have to have in order to drive those numbers.
Absolutely.
Critically important.
One of the things that I see is that schools don't always track leads. And for us, a lead is a name, a phone number, one form of contact information.
Right.
They're kind of focused on being reactive. I'm kind of overgeneralizing right now. I see a lot of great stuff, but it's like, well, but if you have somebody who's interested, you might be just letting them not following up because we know from the EduVenture study a couple of years back that it takes 6 months in evaluating 3 schools before you even go to school online. So a lot of people are shopping out there. So you have to look at anybody who's interested, and you're right, those metrics are important.
Tom, in the study we've done, when we talk to inquirers and applicants, and even though they didn't enroll, they are still in the marketplace for about 6 or 8 months later.
Yeah. So I think that we call it a lead nurturing campaign.
Right.
You want to nurture. We had a question over here.
We were talking about having that ladder and having the associates go into the bachelor's. And what we're seeing with our new associates program is a lot of students don't want to be called associate students. They want to be bridge, transition.
Yeah.
Are there some keywords that we can really use to market that so it's not the stigma of an associates, but it's what they need in order to transition?
Nobody likes junior college.
Right.
That's a great question, and I want to solve that for you. I just don't have the answer right here because that's a marketing question.
I'm just curious how many here too. You talk about start dates.
Yeah.
Recommending a minimum of 6. And I'm curious in here how many have 6 or more start dates right now with the program.
Let's do a poll. Who has more than 6?
More. More than six. And is summer considered part of your start dates? 2 in the summer, 1 in the summer?
It would be, it would be basically, if you look at the 3 traditional terms, it's just adding 1 into the middle of each one of those. So there would be it's getting late for me, but August, October, January, March,
And then are
June.
these predicated on 8-week courses?
Yeah, but you gotta be friends with your financial aid person.
Well, that's the whole. This is exactly what summer.
Well, and it's the chicken and the egg thing, because if you're starting off with not as many students, not as many programs, you have a financial aid issue, and you have to get, hammered there. But again, it's the ideal, you want to be moving towards that. We were just with the school, now granted, they started 3,000 students last year, that they're doing 1 a month. Now they have the capacity to do that. But again, you want to just have that ready to go. Any other questions?
I think the start dates are helpful, but also having just like 6-week sessions, because we actually have 7 start dates in a 6-week session. And I think once we went to the 6-week sessions, our enrollment, especially into adult accelerated program, grew tremendously. And I think it's because people want to get it out and make a career, make a degree faster,
Yes.
and do it in the marketplace, and especially in these economic times.
Yeah, that's a great point where we're talking about an academic issue as marketers here, and that's, I think it's important that you have that voice at the table.
My related point is that if you have more start dates, you should maybe charge your regular or higher prices because you can give them time back, and that's money.
That's right. Of course, faculty issues, having sufficient faculty for all the start dates, clearly a problem as well. Especially when you get into the almost ethical moral obligation for how many hours a teacher who's not part of your normal faculty teaching. All becomes issues.
Well, and your accrediting agency starts to get worried about
Percent
that.
of major to being taught that,
Well, and credit hours, how that translates to instructional hours.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming. Hopefully that was helpful.